My name is Ricardo Cobo, and I'm a principal consultant here at Centrilogic. I am um, leading the app dev and modernization area. So this is right up my alley. And Jeff, I'll let you introduce yourself and
Sure.
maybe do a little intro of the company
Awesome.
as well.
Thank you. So name's Jeff Zato. I've been around in this industry from the early days of mainframes, which we'll have a call out for later in this presentation, and providing POSIX subsystems to that, and it played many different roles in different companies. Right now, I lead the relationship with Microsoft, but my passion has always been, what we'll talk now about, referring to DevOps and application. And I was classically trained, with a Bachelor of Mathematics in computer science from University of Waterloo. Call out to anyone that goes to Waterloo. And this is just a passion area for mine. So, I've been with lots of companies over my 30 plus years in this industry, and have learned a lot from great people in the industry like Ricardo on how to help people with modernization strategies.
Yeah, both Jeff and I worked at Microsoft at some point, so a lot of our presentation is a little biased through to Azure. But the same concepts apply whatever you're thinking in terms of modernizing your application or your infrastructure. All right, so let me see if I can control this thing. So we're gonna go through a very simple agenda: the what, why, and how you are thinking or want to think about modernizing. Then we'll go through the 7 R's, so it's 7 strategies that you should be thinking about. I will do some demos along the way about things that you can use to help you accelerate your modernization. And hopefully we'll have time. Oh, there is a use case about a mainframe modernization and how you can start thinking about it. And then we can go to Q&A if we have enough time. So that what?
Now, Ricardo, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second, just to help us understand a bit more about the audience. In the chat window, I posted a link to a poll site. And we use this just to get a bit of information about the people attending so that we can tailor our stories, our information and stuff to you. So if you could take a second, I'm just going to start and stop a couple poll slides. If you could just fill that out, that would be fantastic. It would just give Ricardo and I just a bit more insight into the people attending so that we talk at the right level and go deep. And once again, I encourage you, any questions you might have, and we'll try to have time at the end for sort of formal open Q&A, talking, but just post your questions into that chat window, and myself or some of my colleagues that are on this call will do their best to basically answer that question or keep it for later on when we can ask Ricardo those questions. So if you could just click upon that link in the chat window, and the first poll is just a bit about understanding of the role of the people that are attending this seminar, just so that we understand a bit going on.
All right. So what are we doing when we say modernizing, Jeff?
So modernizing covers a whole bunch of different areas, right? A lot of times people are looking at modernizing as updating, right? And this is updating older software. It might just be updating the underlying libraries or frameworks, which means you aren't necessarily seeing a bunch of things as the end user of that application. It could be updating the underlying infrastructure behind things in order to allow it to scale. Because for a lot of companies, especially as they're maybe selling their services or doing something in new regions around the world, the underlying application has to support people in different locales, and it might need more horsepower to basically make these things happen. So when we think about what it really is, right, it's all related sort of to the update of that application. For a lot of other people, right, it really means about modernizing things. There are a lot of legacy applications out there. And as we look at sort of security across the board right now, applications were built 10 or 20 years ago didn't have the same security threats challenges that exist today. And it's a very key thing for a lot of people to stay on top of those things, right? So it really, when we look at modernization, it can cover the gamut, right? Like, a lot of hype and a lot of excitement right now is around infusing artificial intelligence in applications to make them smarter, to guide their clients, or to give them insight or connect to other systems. That's all part of sort of what it is. So like when you think about just lifting and shifting, as they call it, moving an application from on-premise or a data center to a cloud provider, right? That is modernization, right? You shouldn't just stop at that. You should really look at, how do I take it the next step to make it more performant, all the ilities, right? Scalability, performance, and all that other stuff, secure. But the biggest thing really is, I lived through the era back in, I'll call it the BEA WebLogic days. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. It's not really used that much anymore on the Java area. But like, people were upgrading for the sake of upgrading because they wanted to be the cool kids with the latest frameworks, and putting in place sometimes things that were not appropriate to support the business. The key really is, when you look at all these things, is it has to be dictated by the business needs. If your business is looking at expanding from North America and supporting Asia, right, then what are the requirements on that application in order to support that? So all things should really be tied back to the business drivers behind that.
And I wanna add something there, is that it goes a little bit also beyond the software and infrastructure. You as you go into more modern frameworks, more modern languages, platforms, your processes need to evolve as well. So that's where we really encourage you to think about the DevOps practices, the best practices for software and development and deployment that should be taken into consideration. It's not good to be in the latest and greatest of everything and still doing like manual deployments or manual testing of your applications, or maybe waterfall processes. So everything kind of comes together. I
Yeah.
think some of the tips and tricks here are to fully understand the drivers of modernization. A lot of times is retirement of some infrastructure, or end of life of some frameworks. Uh, and make sure you have full support, because modernization is not always super smooth and nice. Like there are some bumps in the road, and you need to have full support from everybody to yeah, lend you a hand during that process. So alignment in the organization is pretty important. We're gonna. So why would I do this? Jeff, do you wanna
So
take?
So we're going back and forth. And I
Yeah.
love your caricature at the top. You got to make one for me on the other side, so that we have like a chat. So why do people do this, right? There's a lot of key reasons why people are basically upgrading, depending upon the industry and everything else. One is around innovation, right? Is that we want, as organizations, to basically provide new capabilities. And business drivers, public sector is a bit different, but most business drivers are, I either want to make more money or spend less money to do what I need to do. And we know that software development is a very iterative phrase. It's not that I have all the requirements in my head and develop it once and that I'm done, right? We are constantly seeking feedback from our customers, new customers, prospects, on what can be better, what can streamline what they're doing. And so as an organization, we need to adapt to that. Technical debt is, a big buzzword in the industry and everything else. And the thing is that, you know, all applications, right? It's funny. I talk to some business owners and they go on like, why would someone write software with bugs? And it's, it's sort of a bit crazy sort of from that standpoint. It's complex. Software development is a lot of art and science. And we know over time, right, the technical debt builds up. People need to update frameworks. They need to update them for a couple of reasons. One is maybe the newer technology inside of it allows our application to write less custom code, which means the updates are quicker and easier, and it's less testing on the organization. It could be that things are outdated or there's bugs, right? And if you're using open source libraries and stuff like that, this is a big thing as organizations need to look at. And I know while Ricardo says we lean a bit more towards Microsoft, GitHub has some amazing capabilities, and there's lots of other companies out there as well that can help you automatically scan the open source libraries you're using and look at basically any new information about them to say, should they be updated or not? Updating, as Ricardo said about DevOps, right? And tooling around this to automate things. Back in the day when Ricardo and I were working together, and it was the heyday for a lot of clients just getting into mobile apps. Now we think of mobile apps as everyone has them, it's commonplace. But when that first started, right, I'd say to clients, the only worst thing you can do than not creating a mobile app is not having a strategy to update it. Because while enterprise applications, if people followed the waterfall sort of methodology, you might update once a year, once every couple of years. For mobile apps, it forced for organizations to think more agile and to update their tooling, because updates on mobile apps happen very quickly. Little incremental improvements, new feature to keep the attention of the end users, right? So that's really important, right? Overall improvements talked about on the previous slide, right? Like, we constantly need to look at our applications to understand, what are the end user demands behind it? In a simplistic case that probably doesn't apply to your businesses, but it's just a good example to sort of show it, is when we look at companies that do most of their sales around Christmas time, right? Having infrastructure that can support that big rush at Christmas that is sitting idle 98% of the time throughout the year is really expensive. It's like city planning. No one, we live outside Toronto here in downtown Toronto right now. 50 years ago, no one expected Toronto to be this big. And they couldn't have invested in the highway and the number of lanes to support the population in 50 years, right? So we need to constantly look at our apps and look at our users to say, how can we improve, right? The efficiency, the reliability, the scalability, the security behind it. And this is a big thing that cloud has helped a lot of organizations, because they can basically scale up and scale down if you leverage cloud correctly. And that's a big, big reason why you see a lot of people moving to cloud and taking advantage of things there. And there's different models we might talk about later on, but that's important. Attracting talent. Yeah.
Let me interject there also. Like, I've been consulting for a long time, and there's some scenarios where people have applications that are so old that they have to be contained within a VM. So if they want to, I need to update something in the system, they actually have to log into a VM that is the only machine that can run that application and run it. So sometimes modernizations, besides bringing like a new modern technology, it actually improves the business process behind it. Now let's say I migrated that and or I re-architected it, and now it's running on a web app or in a software on in a desktop app, but I don't need to jump through hoops to run that. So maybe run a browser in compatibility mode or something like that. Well, now that this new software has affected the business process in a positive way. So um, that's something that sometimes get lost. We think about all the reliability, scalability, like sometimes efficiency, and sometimes it's cheaper in the cloud. And we forget that what that brings is a lot of business value as well.
Yeah. I'll interject just with one example. So one of the clients we were dealing with was in the area of mortgage application processing, and they were facing sort of a challenge that they had to upgrade. It was end of life of a lot of hardware that they had, and they had all of this hardware basically in this big lab that needed to be updated, and they wanted to look at it saying, are there alternatives? So they had people that were there constantly applying patches to these machines. The machines and the hardware had to be updated, and they had to cool it and everything else. And when we looked at this client, this was a couple of years ago, and we looked at it and we sort of looked innovatively at that. And we said, okay, let's look at the load demand on these. And it turned out that it was very monthly and cyclic in how these things were done. And the hardware they had actually couldn't handle the high end. And it was sitting idle for a lot of the low end, but still needed maintenance. And we took them multiple steps beyond sort of just, I'll call it replatforming them to the cloud and everything else. And we leveraged some capabilities around what Microsoft Azure in the industry calls PaaS, platform as a service. And so you don't have to think about, I'll call it patching. You aren't thinking sort of at the OS level. And we were able to leverage something called functions. If people are on the call that are more from the AWS side, this would be Lambda. And what it allowed them to do was basically create almost like an in queue of when this needed to be processed, that these functions would spin up and basically take as much work. If there was one or if there was a million, it would just scale to what they needed to be able to process it. And then it would basically go idle again, not consuming any cost or anything like that. And that is a bit of an extreme case of where you look at the business need of the organization saying the old way wasn't cutting it, right? And how could we do this that not just serve the business need of the spinning up, but greatly ease the administration, sort of to Ricardo's point earlier of not logging into a VM for that organization so that the business could scale as the business needed to scale, not dependent upon, I'll call it, the hardware that was able to be purchased at the time. Attracting talent. This one sort of goes unnoticed sometimes. And to me, it's an important one. As we look at, generational switches, right, between millennials and everything else, right? You want to attract the best talent. And the younger people are being educated on these newer practices, using more modern tools and practices. And to attract talent to some industries where IT isn't front and central, but key to that organization, it's important to basically show that you're using some of these leading tools to attract that new talent so that you have, that is a great destination spot, as opposed to having less and less people that can sort of support you because of the skills or interest in that area. And we've seen this play out a lot in organizations and worked with a lot of our clients and stuff like that to help better position their organization as attractive. Because otherwise, when there's scarcity of tech talent or experience in some areas, a lot of people tend to want to go potentially to Microsoft or Google or Amazon or Apple. But all companies are becoming more tech companies and have a need on that. And so to attract the people, that's really important. Response to industry regulation. So we've seen changes over the last 5 years, COVID and interest rates spiking and going down, and that has brought a lot of regulatory compliance around everything from HIPAA and healthcare to finance, and organizations need to be able to adapt to these new government regulations and policies, right? Whether it's company policies or more bigger government, right? When we look at privacy information and the ability and the acts coming from Europe. So we need to be able to respond to that. That's not a big difference to your end customers. In fact, for a lot of organizations, it's a cost that doesn't necessarily generate new revenue. So the easier you can respond, the better your process for development, the better off you're going to be. Replacement of dated and unsupported technology. It still shocks me, Ricardo, when I talked to a client about 4 months ago, and they had a VB5 app, not even a VB6. The number of access databases that exist out there, the number of Windows servers or SQL servers that are fully unsupported now from Microsoft, right? That are still running critical things. And that means they aren't being patched from a security standpoint and everything else. And that to me, as an IT leader, is a scary sort of position for a company to be in, because it's a lot of risk.
Yeah, earlier this year, I met a software developer hero that's trying to upgrade an ASP.NET 1.1 application.
We should have a chart on this, right? Because some of these things predate our the consultants that we work with. But like that, these things are important, right? What I always say to business leaders is, software is like your car. You don't just buy a car and drive it forever. Maybe electric cars are a bit more that way, but you have to do oil changes. You got to change the tires on it. And sometimes you want to upgrade the car because I want the latest Bluetooth capability and everything else. And businesses need to understand that software is an investment, and you need to think about how you're servicing the people using it, internal or external, and that maintenance is required on these things, right? There are safety recalls on all cars, right? And you do that to be safe. These things we're talking about here, from technical debt to security, is critical. Anyway,
Yeah.
um, but
Yeah.
resist the urge to jump into architecture and technologies. There's lots of technology that can solve problems from lots of different vendors and different paths, right? Um, Always tie this back to the business needs, because that way you're going to get the buy-in from the executives all the way down to support you through this journey. And it will be a journey, right? It is not a straight path to modernization. And, anything you modernize, the end users have to be brought along too. You have to think about how to train them on the new capabilities or whatever else. What's in it for them? What's going to make their life easier? And it's one thing we don't call out on the slide, but it's so critical to think about the end people using this and the demographics of them and everything else to ensure success.
Yeah. Understanding the needs is crucial, and there is a lot of like companies, they create these technologies and they actually generate the hype, and you need to kind of parse out like what really applies to your scenario and what doesn't. And for that, actually, we go into the how. And the first thing in the how is to know your portfolio, application portfolio, assessing existing applications that should be modernized. Actually, we recommend creating an app inventory and prioritize them, like based on parameters like, is there a deadline that we need to meet? Like sometimes you need to get out of the data center and you want to put these applications on the top of your list so you don't have to renew contracts or something like that. Or your technology is reaching end of life support and you don't want to be in limbo. So know your application portfolio, prioritize them and organize them, and start making a plan. And for the plan, you have to choose your modernization strategy, and we're going to talk about them on the next slide. But it could be per app or it could be per cluster of apps. Imagine if you had like one API or you have 100. Well, that strategy might be a little bit different there of what technology you choose to modernize into. Um, it, then define a roadmap, like include milestone and timelines, a resource allocation. It's pretty much a business case that you're making to your company on what is it that you're going to be doing by when, and budget considerations are always important. Um, it's normally better to start smaller, manageable task, and start incrementally migrating or modernizing things. Um, Now, this one I think I talked about a little bit is more than just app modernization, like the tools, the practices, the technologies. DevOps principles are really important to get you where you want to be. Your job, as Jeff was saying, does not end when you take this app and put it into the cloud, or in your new technology. As you always should be monitoring and optimizing the performance of your application. If you go into the cloud, that has the added benefit, that monitoring and has the benefit that you could right size your infrastructure to ensure that you're not paying too much for resources that you may not be using. But it also gives you insight of how your application is performing, if it has bugs and or issues that you need to be aware of. Some of the tips here is start small, smart, and soon. Like you you don't need to wait to have your whole roadmap to maybe do your first application if you start small. Don't skip the planning. It is tempting to go and it in the cloud. You can do things pretty fast if you want, but that doesn't necessarily mean that is done well. So do your planning and understand what needs to happen, and always infrastructure goes first. If you don't have what we call a landing zone or your own carved space in the cloud to put your company's applications, um, then things won't be secure enough or reliable enough for your applications to run. So make sure all the infrastructure necessary, the network settings, the boundaries to your space in the cloud are set up correctly. And you don't need to do all of this by yourself. You can seek expert help. Partners like us are always ready to help. But there is a lot of new things in the cloud, and things happen very quick. So it is understandable that you would need help, and seeking is one of the expert tips and tricks that I can give you. Any other comments, Jeff?
I think the only thing as I read through this was the cost, right? It's important, right? And to me, any change, right? Change for good is still difficult for organizations because everyone is taxed on what they're doing. So helping your team, right? Their confidence, right, in these new spaces is critical, right? And so, the advice of sort of start small so that you can test and get those little wins along the way. I think
Yeah,
it's so key, right? And once again, while we're focused very much, I'll call it on the IT teams and everything else, I can't emphasize enough the number of places we've gone into to help and bring teams and create great solutions. But if there's not a plan by the organization on how they roll that out to the end users, whether it's your end customer or internal, it's critical because once
yeah,
again, you know, Ricardo and I live and breathe technology. So we're technologists, we play with this stuff, we enjoy it. A lot of people, and I use my mom as an example when she was alive, right? Use technology to get a business outcome. They feared, I'll call it technology to a degree sometimes. And we need to really put ourselves in that mindset when we're doing these things to understand how's it going to be perceived and received, and how do we measure and help the successful adoption of things.
right. So if we play a game and think that we're modernizing our whole application, let's now suppose that we have our application portfolio is prioritized, and I want to build a roadmap. So I want to know what strategies normally we have um, to do that. And there is the 7 R's strategy, and that basically makes it a little bit easier to remember. But with the 7 R's, what I will tell you is okay. So during this slide, guys, I'm gonna be showing some demos, some tools uh, of that can help you through this process. So the first R is rehost. It's the typical lift and shift. Minimal or no code changes necessary. Things are inside a VM, for example. They're running on a data center and they're going to be running on a different one, either the cloud or other data center. And an example of a scenario is a data center exit, and you have tools like for Azure. I'm pretty sure the other ones will have it, that will help you identify all those host workloads that are in your infrastructure and that need to be migrated. And here I'm gonna switch for a second to the portal, and let me do this. And Azure itself has something called Azure Migrate. What it is it's basically a service on the cloud that will receive information that you send them and then help you generate a roadmap for those applications. So for this one in particular, the migration goals would be, for example, migrate virtual machines. Um, so how it works is that you create a project here on the portal and then you install tools on your virtual machine. And normally you install on your host a virtual machine that is collecting information and it will send it up here into Azure. And you kind of can get it to build a business case or do a dependency analysis, do an assessment, and it will help you understand the steps that you need to take to go into the next step. So this is a tool that is available for free on Azure, and it's something there are videos all over the place that help you understand how to set up that additional VM on your host and what it does. It's basically an agent collecting information and sending it up, and you can truly understand what is it that you're going to need for this. So that is Azure Migrate. There is a second part to it, but rehosting is the minimum that you should be doing. Uh, the the next step would be replatform, and is where you go in from your data center, for example, into a platform as a service like app service. This basically starts removing a lot of the maintenance job that you have to do, and help you start focusing on your applications. So there might be code changes on here, but it's basically just to make sure your application is platform ready. So things like if you're using sessions and you're gonna go into a web farm that's not gonna work, these you're gonna have to rethink. If you're using some local files for some reason, or you're writing files into your local that are supposed to be persistent, well, that's something that you have to rethink, because once you're in a platform as a service, that persistent storage needs to be externalized. But all in all, it kind of focuses on infrastructure still. You're re-platforming, not re-architecting or anything. And another tool that can be used for that, I'm going to show you two for this one. There is one called, um, oh, did I close that? I think I did. Let me just go like this and open it again. So this is another service called App Service Migration Assistant. The App Service Migration Assistant is is in cases where you have like IIS running on your machine, and it's trying to help you migrate into Azure App Services. So in my local IIS, I have two websites. So how this works is I select a website that I want, and I'm gonna say next, and it's gonna do an analysis based on the configuration files, the DLLs, and the code that is available for it. And it's gonna give me a report of what is it that I need to do to make this app service ready. In this case, I think there are some configuration errors in IIS, and there is some global modules that I don't have. After this, I could log into Azure and submit my findings. So in here, I could say web apps, and basically I've assessed two websites. I discover one server, and then I can go into them, and it will tell me what are the things that I need what are the things that were found. So basically, it helps you keep track of your migration project. Um, Now, that is a tool that you can use when you have IIS and you have a lot of websites and you kind of want to see what is it that you want to do. But there is another one, and this one introduces some AI capabilities. So I have this software, this application that I built years ago. I am right here in Visual Studio. Um, there isn't a very good way to make this bigger, but I'm gonna go into my web and I have installed an extension called install Azure Migrate Application and Code Assessment. So by installing this extension, I get this very nice option of re-platform to Azure. I don't know if you can see it there. Re-platform to Azure. So what that's gonna do is gonna allow me to create a report, and I can say, well, where do you wanna migrate? And these are all possible um, targets, but I'm gonna go with a simpler one. Would be a service for Windows. I want to show you that this application is actually running in framework 4.6, which is a little old, but it still should be supported. So I'm going to go and say next and select all the projects that I want them to analyze. And it's going to be something similar. It's going to do something similar to what the app migration service did, pointing at my IIS, but now it's looking at the code internally. It understands that I have two projects. The library, understandingly, it's very simple, but the home therapy, the web one, it has some issues, right? And two of them are mandatory for me to fix. I can see here what the problem is, where it is, and all of this I'm inside of my IDE. So if I go to my dashboard, see, there's some next steps, and I have GitHub Copilot enabled, so I can say, hey, guide me through the migration steps. What is it that I need to do? And now GitHub Copilot is going to analyze this report and it's going to generate what are the next steps for me to do. And it'll take a minute. I do have the Copilot PC, but this part doesn't seem to be faster. So it analyzed the report and it said, well, you need to take care of three things. And then right here is say, I can help you with a smooth migration. What do you want to tackle first? And I can go say, well, let's start with the file IO operations. And it's going to tell me what is it that I need to do for that. So I think obviously it's not going to take me all the way there, but it's going to be a great help along the way to help me understand what is it that I need to do. This works with any project that you can open in Visual Studio, but I am not sure if it's already done for VS Code. So it is telling me that I need to create a blob storage and move static files there. If I have a blob storage account already, I can click on it and I think it's going to generate a file that is going to have the configuration. I can paste my information there. So anyway, this extension, Azure Migrate and Code Assessment, that could help you through the process. All right, so that's when you're gonna re-platform. Refactor, you need to make code changes to take the most of cloud environments. For example, if you're going to the cloud and you need some caching mechanism that you were doing locally and now you want to externalize to Redis or something like that, you have to refactor your application a little bit to do that. but you also focus on improving the code quality and maintainability. Rearchitect changes both application and code. And now, while these two rehosts and replatforms are just things that you wanted to do to maybe get into the cloud, refactor and rearchitect now are focusing on the app itself, and it comes from a motivation of trying to make things better. And a re-architecture could be moving monolith to microservices. It's typically done to improve scalability on your application, but also to take advantages of all the cloud features. Rewrite. Now, when you have technologies like maybe a mainframe or an old BB6 application, BB5. Oh my God, Jeff, I don't think I ever worked on that. Um, Sometimes your best bet is to go and do a rewrite. And during the rewrite, you take the opportunity not only to do one to one, but make things better. This requires the maximum effort, of course, but sometimes it's necessary and advisable. And yeah, so it's basically you take the old application as a reference. Normally there is no um, normally there's not gonna be any documentation to this, so you're gonna have to read the code and understand it. And for that, well, if you're lucky enough to have a VA, is amazing. But normally the application is older in place than the VA has been in the company. So a lot of the time we find that the code tells us something different than the business understands. Uh, Thankfully, we have Copilot now. And Copilot is great to help you explain this. So as an example here, I'm going to show you some COBOL code. Um, and what I'm going to do in here, so this is like a big list of COBOL code. Imagine this could be Visual Basic, or, well, there's nothing older. Well, there's a lot of thing older, but COBOL is kind of like a perfect example. I can go into Copilot, and this is like the embedded one. I could go into the chat as well, but I'll do it from here and just say explain. And once I click on it, it's just gonna go and start talking about what is looking there. So I'm gonna view in chat because I can read it better, but it's line by line kind of telling me what it's finding. I'm gonna go it's important to know that this code is going as it's not contained. I think I didn't let it complete, so I'm gonna say explain from here. So it recognized right away that it's on COBOL. It kind of gives me a lot of information about what's happening, but it also gives me a summary. It's present in summary. COBOL code setup and basic infrastructure of a program name. It defines several constants. It was used to manage information. Now, this is very interesting. When I did the preparation for the demo, it actually told me here that it was used to present timing indicator. But I can say here, translate this code to C#, and it's going to try to do it. It's going to generate something, and I can then do this, like do it into a new file, and voila, I have something that I can probably not use. This is a very simple code. Like, don't think by any chance that you're going to be able to do this fully on discard fully on all your production code, but at least it could, if you're more used to reading code in C Sharp, now you can make better sense of it. The same thing like with this merge sort kind of uh, code. I can go and say explain, and it kind of understand what this thing is doing, and again, what I really like is the summary at the end. It kind of tells me the overall is essential power. Yeah, it is weird, like how still sometimes it gives different understandings, different results. But hey, that's what you get for doing live demos.
But it's
Um,
amazing though, having that expert over your shoulder. Like I know,
oh
Ricardo, our
yeah,
team uses GitHub Copilot quite extensively.
yes,
And like it helps everyone from the business analysts to be able to build out their user stories and to create the backlog inside of Azure DevOps and GitHub and all that other stuff. As well as it can help junior people basically as that mentor over the shoulder. And I've seen it used for help. How would I make this more performant? Right in code, or are there any security things that I'm missing? Like it to me, it's incredible, right? Just in the short couple of years, right? How far these tools have come along with DevOps and automation to really enhance organizations' capabilities and understanding. But as you said, if it's converting code, you still need someone with deep chops and understanding to say, is what it's doing correct, right? Because it's an opinion. And so you still need those experts and stuff like that to validate it and not just assume like the old VB6 migration tools or language translation tools
yeah,
that it's correct.
yeah. So absolutely, and to our consultants, like when I've kind of challenged them to give it a try, um, nobody can give it up after they start using it. So it's pretty powerful. So
So,
the
Ricardo,
sixth
I have a
one,
question on the slide for you. So at the top, you said 7 hours. And correct me if I'm wrong. And yes, my bachelor of mathematics from Waterloo is from a long time ago in '92, but I only see 6 on the screen. What's the
I
seventh?
know. So I'm pretty. I'm happy your education paid off. I'll let you know the seven in a second. Let's talk about
Okay.
replace first. Uh, Replace is when you have an application, but there it was maybe built a long time ago, and now there is something that already does that. Right? So why would you want to keep maintaining that? Just replace it with something that is ready to use. This is very no development required, but it can introduce some integration challenges. But in the long run, it's probably a good idea. And yes, there is seven. The seventh is retire. Right?
Oh, hidden slide.
Yeah. Some processes will become obsolete with modernization, or just because they're just no longer um, available. Now remember that prioritize list that I asked you to do before. Well, here you can start saying, well, this one, after this one is migrated, this one is not needed, something like that. So we have 8 minutes, and I want to run you through modernization that we are doing, or we have been doing. So we have done mainframe modernizations before. A mainframe architecture normally looks something like this. There is like a mainframe where you have not only your data, but with your green screens or whatever. For a big financial institution, we did like a modernization where what they wanted was just an API in front of the mainframe. So we kind of created a process and had a web app here hitting this that had like a cache information of what people needed. But normally you have a mainframe, and they can no longer live in isolation. So there's a lot of processes around it that are maybe updating other databases, or generating reports and putting files somewhere, or communicating via file transfers with some other external services. So normally you'll have something like this, and the idea is to identify the these like the logical units that are within all this diagram, like what is the front end, what is the back end, how many database are we logically talking about this about it here, how do we integrate with other things, and we have this is pretty close to something that we're doing. Um, we have two web applications that are equivalent to both the green screens and the web apps, different databases to support different type of information. A lot of these processes that handle like reports or consolidation or integration are done either via Databricks or functions. So sometimes you will find not only on mainframe, but on regular monolith applications that a lot of strain or a lot of work what was put into the mainframe or the monolith itself. So the monolith would do background processes, would do um, um, long running processes, and all of that is consuming compute resources in the wrong place. Like you don't want your front end, like the thing that is serving your front end or your front services to be doing a lot of background work because that's just consuming resource that could slow down your response times, etc. So a big part of modernization is going into distributed architectures where things that do not need to be done by a component are distributed to other parts. And Service Bus is an enabler of that, and Azure functions are actually the way that you would externalize or distribute that work separately. So this is by no means something that like a recipe. This is what came through studying the needs of that particular mainframe, the process and integrations that it had, and this is kind of what we came up with. Um, Now, in Azure, this is supported by all the supporting services. It is important, as I said, that you have a good landing zone that has some of these modules already set up for you so your workloads are secure. Now, there's many services in Azure, and how do you select the right one for you? Well, they have this kind of flow that guide you through what is the best for me. Now, remember, this is published by Microsoft, so it is not, again, a recipe, but it could be a guide. It's a decision matrix here of what is the best for you. Jeff, I think you have the link and you were going to post it, but if you just search by this, it
I
will
will
come up.
post it.
The other thing that is very is a very interesting read is this book about is not A or B. Like when you were in a data center mindset, uh, you were going to invest a lot of capital into buying servers and technologies, and it kind of made the decision for you that now everything kind of needs to be like in these blocks. But with the flexibility that comes with the cloud, is no longer either A or B technology. You can create the right mix for your needs. So we're thinking more A plus B. For example, an app service plus functions is very common to have. Or Azure Container Apps, like my favorite, plus static web apps. So there is a good mixture of things that you can come up with, and you should no longer be constrained to say, "Oh, this is my technology stack, and this is where I'm gonna go." You have flexibility, and you should use it. Um, that was it. We can go into Q&A. Oh, actually, I have a little thing here now that I think, see, keep it simple. Like I love this guy, and I love this how he says this. Like just keep it simple, smart, small, but start. So that
Awesome.
that that is it for us. If there are questions, I think we have. Like I can stay another 5 minutes.
Yeah, we can open it up if people want to unmute and ask questions. There's been no questions posted, so I think you did a great job, and I'm just so impressed. Even though I talked a bit long, that you finished 1 minute to the hour of what you promised. That is impressive, Ricardo. I learn things from you every single time from here, and it's Ricardo and all the colleagues sort of in behind them. A lot of our consultants have 20 plus years in the industry, and it's like you said, it's not about just the technology. Technology changes constantly and in the right pattern. It's very much about helping ensure that it's the right fit for your organization. Whether it's, we talked a lot about C plus and C sharp and all the rest of these things, but we do a lot in Power Apps. And for a lot of organizations, smaller organizations that have strong business people with small technical core, Power Apps could be a very viable framework sort of for what they need to do. So it's really looking at the experience that the people have. And, a lot of our consultants have transformed themselves from older technologies and platforms and been very leading edge on a lot of the cloud technologies. And, we work hard to help our clients not just get the right solution, but help them put the right process and confidence in their people so that they can carry forward those great solutions that have been created. With that, I thank you all very much for your time and focus as we went through this. I encourage you to fill out the survey. I posted the link to that in the chat window. That really does give us a lot of feedback, and we do modify what we do based upon that. So we appreciate you taking the time for that and taking the hour to spend with us. And hopefully our paths will cross again as we look at how we might be able to help you with projects in your app modernization or data modernization. And there's so much more that Centrilogic does, and we look forward to exploring the opportunities with you.